Hello everybody and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today I'm at Berkeley with Greg La Blanc. Hey Greg, how are you doing?
Good to talk with you, Eric.
Thanks for joining. So Greg is a lecturer here at the Berkeley Business School. He teaches at Berkeley, Stanford, HEC in Paris. So you work a lot with people who work on digital transformation in the business space. You're more from the business side of things. And I thought it might be really interesting to talk a little bit about how APIs affect the business side and how sometimes I think the communication doesn't work too well between the business side and the tech people. So I think for this conversation we can assume I'm the tech side, you're the business side, which is true, I guess.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about how you see API things from your angle.
Yeah, well, so I've been teaching a course called Digital Transformation actually for the last couple of years in some of these places, as you mentioned, and I've even had you, Eric, come and speak in these programs. And the way I look at these is not just for students, but also for executives. There's certain things about technology that every business person needs to know, right? And so, a lot of business people don't have that deep technical expertise, but in today's world, every company is a technology company, every company is a software company. And so if you have people that don't have any understanding whatsoever of how the technology works, they really can't be competent managers. And so part of the idea is, like, how deep do they need to go, right? What do they need to understand? And APIs are just so central to the modern business organization that if your organizational leadership doesn't know what they are, how they work, or why they exist, then they simply can't manage in a modern economy.
Yeah, that's a good point. How deep do you need to know these things? And that's the part where I always struggle a little bit, because I see that on the one hand, on the business side, very often people say, yes, we need APIs, because clearly without APIs, nothing works in today's world. On the other hand, I sometimes feel like they think that any API is good enough, so to speak, right? And then you have like this miscommunication where the business side says, hey, we need APIs, and then the tech side says, sure, we have some,
right?
But these are not really the right APIs, so to speak. So I think my struggle often is, how do you get organizations to focus on building the right APIs and not just some APIs and then assuming, well, any API will be magic?
Well, it's not just with APIs. I think it's with any kind of technology.
That's true.
What happens is that business people, they hear about a technology and they think, oh, I need that, right? Like I need a data lake, right? Or I need machine learning, right? Or I need APIs, right? And if they don't understand why they need it, then they're most likely just going to waste a whole bunch of money, right? So we hear about how 80% of machine learning projects fail, how 80% of, I don't know where these consulting firms come up with these numbers, but the idea is that, like, most of these initiatives don't achieve what they set out to achieve, primarily because they don't really know what they're trying to achieve.
Yes.
Right? And so if you understand why you're doing it, then we'll start asking questions, right? If you ask a few questions, then you can figure out pretty quickly whether or not you're doing it the right way or for the right reasons. And so, usually when I'm describing the relevance of APIs, I go back a few steps and I say, look, the way in which you organize your business, the way in which you organize your information flows, the way you organize your teams, right? The way in which you think about kind of firm boundaries and divisional boundaries and team boundaries, like, this is the essence of what it means to be a manager, right? And so, you have to think through, right, what that's going to look like, and it has to line up with the possible. Right, and so as technology changes what's possible, right, it's going to change, the optimal organizational architecture. And so I think if you always go back to, organizational architecture, right, decision making, division of responsibility, right, communications, interfaces, right, firm boundaries. Those are the key issues. And then the APIs that's the enabling technology.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so I think it really is that the business people don't start with the why. Start with the why, then I think you'll wind up with the right technology.
I like that part a lot. A little while ago I had Stephen Bungay on, and I really liked his way of framing it, which I will never forget. He called it the Spice Girls question, which is, tell me what you want, tell me what you really, really want. Yeah. Right? So always ask this question, right? So
I might have to steal that from you.
No, but it's Stephen. Okay. But I think it's really nice, because in the end, that's the point, right? Don't tell me we should do APIs. Yeah. tell me why,
Yeah.
right? What do you want to achieve with it? And then
Yeah.
I, maybe from the technology side, can
Yeah.
go back and say, okay, here are some APIs
Yeah.
which will do this for you.
Right.
Do they work? And then we kind of have a conversation going.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a problem. Vendors, right? Vendors are always just trying to sell, right? And so they're like, sell first, ask questions later.
Mm-hmm.
And and so a lot of organizations on the flip side are like, if I'm a CTO, CIO, whatever, it's like I checked the box. I bought what you told me to buy. Like I signed the deal, I signed the contract, and then
and why isn't magic happening?
I've done my job, right? And
Yeah.
and so if that happens, then it's really on the leadership. I mean, and the leadership hasn't done its job, which is to think about how does this fit in with the business strategy.
So, in your opinion or in your experience, what is the best way to make sure that these things don't happen? Right? Like, what's your go-to move, so to speak, to make sure that if you have these companies, because, I mean, frankly, I also work a lot with companies who are in this position where they say, hey, we have APIs, we bought your platform, and we have APIs that we use, but we don't feel like we're getting out of it what we were hoping for. So what's your go-to move to kind of change the way how things are going in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, do you want to wipe the slate clean and start from scratch, right? Because you think that everything's going to be better with this new structure, or do you say, listen, let's do this in a step-by-step way? And even though it would be in many ways kind of easier just to kind of wipe the slate clean,
start
and
over,
from scratch, right? In reality, not only is that very difficult for businesses to do, but also then they kind of lose their way and they lose sight of why they're doing stuff. So sometimes an incremental approach where you say, what are my biggest pain points right now, and how can I resolve them? And so once you start resolving some of them, then you're like, oh, this is great. Now all of these other things then surface up as pain points, and that leads you to take the next steps. Mm-hmm. So I think of it almost as can we do agile AI, agile API implementation?
Oh, let's not go that way.
I don't know.
Agile APIs.
Is there such a thing? I mean, I don't know.
I haven't heard about it, but now that you've said it, I'm sure somebody will pick it up.
Because right. I mean, I've seen this in AI, right? If you, with a lot of these AI implementations, it's like, oh, let's just boil the ocean, and it's like, well, then you're waiting and waiting and waiting for results. Whereas if you just say, hey, let's just start small. Let's start, getting results early, and then that builds momentum within the organization, right? I mean, because you need to have people who are demanding it. You need to have people that are fighting for it rather than everybody kind of resisting it. And the only way to do that is to have some early wins.
But I think the agile API part actually does make a lot of sense, because in many cases, the API, let's say, value proposition is to say, if you have these building blocks that are exposed through APIs, it's more easy for you to combine them, and you speak a lot about run experiments, right? Figure out what works, what doesn't work. So it makes you more agile in the sense, not so in a technical sense, but just this idea of try to have shorter iteration cycles, try out more things, learn as quickly as you can, and then you can actually better figure out where you want to go.
Well, I think that principle of organizational architecture applies even if you're not in the world of APIs, right? So I used to work in restaurants, and when the chef is making a dish, the chef wants to be able to just reach over and there's like a brown sauce there, right? And they can just grab some spoonful of brown sauce. They don't want to reach over and say, oh, now I got to make the brown sauce, right? They want the brown sauce to be there, and they want the saucier to have made it for the chef and then put it in an easy reach space, right? And so this just goes back to the basic principles of operations, of manufacturing, right? And sometimes it's easy to use that language. I mean, I remember before the financial crisis, I tried to explain to bankers how they were in the business of manufacturing, taking raw materials like mortgages and converting them into securitized products. And that meant you had to think about inventory. And they're like, what? Inventory? And same thing when you're making software, right? If you're manufacturing software, or you're in the business of producing, data products, which is what every company is doing now, you have to think in the same sense, right? You have building blocks, you have ingredients, and the most powerful analogy that I've been able to use when I'm talking to business people about APIs is I talk about Chipotle.
Okay.
I say,
and that's because you have a cooking background. I
I didn't work in Chipotle, but I say, how many different burritos can you get at Chipotle? Okay, and they think about it for a while, and then they realize, oh, there's like millions. There's millions of possible, right, burritos you can get at Chipotle, even though you have this relatively small store with a relatively small, counter, relatively small footprint, and a relatively small number of ingredients. And it's just the power of the network effects, right? Metcalfe's law, right? And so when you realize how powerful that analogy is, then you see the power of modularity, composability, APIs, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Now that you're saying it, you're right. It's pretty surprising how many different things you can make out of this small countertop of just a handful of ingredients.
And what that means then is you can try things out.
You can try things out.
You can say, oh, let's try the like the chocolate burrito. And, oh, well, that didn't work, right? And so you just don't make it anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to shut down the restaurant, right? You just so you can try out lots and lots of different ideas. And in fact, you can even let the customer design the trials and let them try out all the different things. And if the internal customer is an engineer, you let the engineer experiment with all these different configurations and so forth at low cost.
I think the one disadvantage, so to speak, of this example is that at Chipotle, I think they don't really take your order and put it into some system, right? So they wouldn't be able to learn from all the different choices that people make.
Yeah.
So they have all these choices, right? But they don't really.
It would be anecdotal, right?
Yeah.
It would be, like
nobody ever wanted chocolate sauce. So let's dump that.
The other thing is that Chipotle, I don't know whether they have like a bunch of presets, right? So number one, number two, number three. So if they had like a series of presets, then presumably those presets would have to be demand generated.
Sure.
Or,
the good ones would bubble up.
Exactly. You need a feedback mechanism or something like that. But look, even in restaurants that don't have any IT or any kind of databases, they have a carbon-based database. Yeah. A little bit less, efficient, but word gets around, right? And this is sort of how McDonald's, the Big McRib was a big hit in Arkansas, and it kind of spread to the rest of the country.
Oh, okay.
Right, and so it was a little, little wonky how it happened, but you do have that kind of bubbling up of popular combinations.
And in the end, it all depends, I think, on the business people to just pick up that data, right? And whichever form it is available, either as data or carbon-based, right? But just understand that, okay, there is something going on here. We ran some experiments. So this is very useful, I think. So if you had to give, let's say, our viewers a tip in terms of how can you improve your API program, what would your main, let's say, suggestion from the business side of things be to also help people more on the technology side to make their APIs more effective or more impactful?
Well, you need champions, right? You need kind of advocates, and so that means you need some easy wins, right? And so you got to start with some easy wins and figure out, and I love this example where I recently applied to get a parking pass for my car here in Berkeley.
Oh, okay. Right? That must be hard, I guess.
Yeah, and so, the city of Berkeley is like, hey, we're in California, we should be digital. So it used to be you had to go down to physically get your, parking pass.
I did that, like the little stickers on the car.
So you have to go down there and you fill out a form, and then they say, okay, here's your sticker, right? So they're like, we're going to go digital. So we're going to allow you to get your parking pass online. We're going to go to a website. So I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, this is so awesome. I can go to the website and get my parking pass. So I go to the website, and I'm filling the thing out, and they say, okay, upload a photograph of your car registration. Right?
A little break in the process there.
So I got to take a picture of my car registration, my paper car registration. I'm like, well, where am I going to get a paper car registration? Oh, I go to the California DMV, which has decided to go digital. And so I can go to that website and apply to have a paper car registration sent to me. So think about this. The state of California and its subunit, City of Berkeley, which is part of the state of California, both of them have decided that they're digital because I can now apply for these things online. But it never occurred to anybody that the City of Berkeley and the state of California ought to be able to talk to each other, right? So I'm going here, I'm basically doing the work of pinging the database in the state of California.
That is true. You're the API there.
And then communicating this information back to the city of Berkeley, when in fact the city of Berkeley should be able to access that directly. Okay, and so there's someone in the system who designed, right, these processes. They just weren't thinking in terms of communication, right? And they weren't putting themselves in the position of the user, and so I think people sometimes have a misunderstanding of what digital is, and they think that digital is, okay, I've got a website or whatever. When digital really is just start with the customer problem, start with the user problem, start with the employee problem, and then work backwards. And this just goes back to basic customer journey mapping, employee journey mapping, right? Design process tooling and so forth. And these are not new principles; these are old principles. Yes. But we have new technologies that allow us to execute on these missions more effectively.
But in the defense of the city of Berkeley, I have to say, maybe in the end I would say they probably knew that this would be much nicer, but then in the end the DMV maybe doesn't have an API, right?
Yeah.
So they said, well, the best we can do is at least you can apply for it so you don't have to go there anymore. Yeah. And here's like this little kind of crack in the process that we just have to accept. And then once the DMV does have an API, we can patch that up, right?
Right.
So I think in terms of quick wins, I mean, maybe you could even say, well, they made a first step as good as possible.
Yeah.
And hopefully maybe a year from now or 2 years from now when you have to renew your permit, maybe then you can actually just...
Well, and here I've got my tickets because apparently it didn't go through and no one told me. So I wound up getting a ticket anyway.
Okay, so there's work to do.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you got to just start with what is the problem, right? What does the customer want? What does the employee want? What's the purpose of the business?
Okay. Well, I think that's a great takeaway. Thanks so much for joining, Greg, and thanks for joining everybody. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and until next time, please keep getting APIs to work. Bye-bye.
Bye.